Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Sam Gabriel here, and welcome to What If Deku Could Manipulate Gravity, Part 6. Just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax, you're in for a treat, so we begin. Well, damn, you can be pretty scary. Mina chuckled as she moved to let a certain greenette sit down. Huh? What do you mean? Izuku's answer and gentle smile only made the friendship group more scared, as the complete 180 change in mood made it seem like the earlier fiasco didn't even happen. You're right, nothing happened. Let's focus on the match. They all turned toward the fight between Ida and Shoji as Denki hissed to the others, Remind me not to piss Midoriya off. I know, man. I totally forgot he's just as competitive as him. It was overlooked a lot, as Izuku took losses better than Bakugo. It was exactly why Todoroki forgot about him at the end of the cavalry battle, as the bi-colored boy assumed the greenette was happy in second because the blonde was in third. They learned never to forget this again, as they focused on the battle. Ida wasn't having an easy time against his opponent because his trump card had been revealed against Sato. Speed was only so effective when the opponent had the acute senses to predict their adversary. The engine boy was now at a major disadvantage. Shoji was essentially a walking net made of limbs, and although that description was strangely accurate, it didn't help the Azurette any better. The match was over as quickly as it started. Shoji moves on to the next round! Midnight exclaimed excitedly. So it's Octo Arms that you're going up against next. Kirishima and Sero were cheering as Mina walked on stage with Tokoyami on the other side. Denki was yelling his lungs out too as Bakugo sat back. Yep, and then I win. Don't get cocky, dumbass. Then stop being a dickhead. Stop making wiener jokes and help me cheer on Mina, said the guy that shares a quirk with one. What? Ha! Nice one. The two laughed as poor Kirishima looked lost. The joke just completely flew over his head. The chaotic duo then faced each other with a mean grin. Your hero name should be Public Indecency, the legal hero. Oh, wait, hold on. Hey, guys, what was that for? The two cackled as the redhead got it, giving each other a fist bump. That was a good one, Planetoid. I know, right? Hey, it's Gravitoid. Tokoyami moves on to the next round. The cheers of the crowd made Bakugo stand up and walk out as Kirishima followed suit. Their battle was next, and the greenette chatted with Denki as Mina plopped herself down in the chair. Man, I totally lost. Izuku chuckled warmly at the frustrated girl who turned toward him. Never mind that, I guess. How do you plan to fight Shoji? Her mood change was just as quick as a certain greenette's, and it took him by surprise. So that's what they see each time. Huh. Oh, Shoji? Well, I guess I need to test what I did by accident earlier. As Kirishima was going head-on with a hand-to-hand combat battle, Izuku muttered, decrease, a couple times. Within seconds, he could barely feel the weight of anything that made contact with his hands. Wait, decrease? I thought you were punching with black holes or something. The freckled boy laughed at the comment as he shook his head, re-explaining how he felt when he used his quirk, as well as telling a small story from his past. As I said, increasing gravity causes about 2.5 times the strain on my body's water levels than decreasing does. This means if I were to increase the gravity of a football-sized volume of air, I can hold it for about 4 hours. Now, if I were decreasing, it would be 10 hours instead. Wait, you're saying you can hold your quirk for that long? Izuku nodded, but quickly reminded them that it was just a football size, and the boy only used his quirk once. If he were to continue increasing or decreasing, the time was obviously shorter. I already experimented that if I'd say decrease once, it initially would divide the weight by 5. The next 4 times halves the weight each round, and I haven't gone further because I've fainted otherwise. The boy sheepishly laughed as he went on about how he got too excited and had actually passed out almost every night since the USJ incident. This was all from research on his own quirk. He had wanted to know everything he could find, even if it meant going until he woke up the next morning completely confused. He was doing the same now, except Izuku was wary not to overuse his power in case he fainted before his match. Instead, he just let his highly adaptable brain do the work as he gently tapped his quirk-infused hand on the other palm. I'm lost, man. Can you explain it so I get it? Another simpler explanation was given to Denki as explosions rang out the stage. Kirishima was almost at his limit as Bakugo started to fight back. Essentially, I decreased the gravity of my hand so everything I touch feels really light to me. However, to what is receiving my touch, it still has my actual mass crashing into them. So for me to punch someone normally, They feel my mass, but times whatever multiplier I decreased with. Basically, I punched both that Gen Ed student and Todoroki with about 10 times the usual force. Downing another bottle of water at the end of his explanation, Bakugo almost finished his battle, and it was time for another break. "Did you watch me win, Planetoid?" Bakugo egotistically grinned as he spoke. He had lost in the cavalry battle, but planned to make it up by winning the whole tournament. His freckled friend just smiled pleasantly back. "Absolutely not." "Ooh, harsh." The group continued to chatter amongst themselves as the semifinals were approaching. They decided to start heading for the waiting rooms, and Izuku found himself sitting with Mina as Kirishima and Denki followed the blonde. "Good luck!" The alien girl waved him off as she took the empty water bottles from his hands. He smiled gratefully before taking a deep breath. It was time for his fight against Shoji. This shouldn't be too hard. Standing on the ring before his opponent, Izuku took a casual stance as the masked one seemed ready to act. "Start!" And Shoji immediately makes the first move. This man was ready for action. His arms are everywhere. What will Midoriya do? As Mike screamed his play-by-play, Aizawa just looked down silently from beside him. The year had already been hectic as 5 of his students had witnessed death, and from how Shigaraki acted, he was worried they wouldn't be the last. Am I seeing this right? Midoriya has turned the tables. Shoji is now floating up. The greenette had used his quirk on his classmate as the duply armed boy came crashing down. The power Shoji inputted was turned against him as the rebound force sent his now light body barreling up. The one responsible was just grinning. Seeing the 5 all make it into the one-on-ones did ease Aizawa's thoughts a little, though. He was glad to know that they had used the experience to move forward. Although I could already imagine those 2 specific problem children making it to the end, Bakugo could be seen explosively cheering for his friend through the screen, showing what was going on in the waiting rooms. The tired man could also spot Kirishima laughing with what he presumed to be Denki in the corner, and he scoffed before turning away. From where the homeroom teacher sat, he could also pick out a pair talking. Ida's looking at his phone really hard. I guess he's upset Ingenium couldn't make it to the festival? There has been a recent problem in Hosu where the agency is. Never mind. Uraraka seems to have cheered him up. What a deadly combo! Shoji can't even touch Midoriya! The tired eyes returned to the battle in time to see Izuku increasing gravity on his floating opponent. The greenette would then decrease his own gravity and jump up before coming down to deliver a heavy blow. The problem was that he was obviously used to fighting feet first, which made his trajectory unstable. It gave Shoji enough time to grow more protective limbs, but it was obvious that he was reaching his limit. Every time he jumped, Izuku would decrease the boy's weight, which only repeated the cycle of being heavily dropped. The only reason why the match hadn't ended yet was because the greenette hadn't been able to land a proper hit to knock Shoji out. Is he going to be okay? I know he drank a lot, but Shoji's the biggest one in our class. And with all the extra arms, isn't Midobro going to be out first? Kirishima stopped mucking about with Denki to face the screen, and Bakugo shook his head. No way in hell. Either Planetoid finally puts his brain to use and figures a way out, or he'll just win by pushing himself to the limit. It's annoying, but even half unconscious, the idiot can keep fighting. So it's win-win, but the difference is whether he wins quickly or slowly? Man, I wish I could have someone say that about me. No way in hell, dunceface. The battle went on, and just like Bakugo guessed, Izuku was in the midst of calculating what he could do. His ability to adapt was the reason All Might noticed him, after all, and this thinking power was put to good use as the child changed his fighting style mid-battle. What's he doing now? Mike excitedly screeched like a singing cockatoo as his play-by-play became more and more intense. The freckled boy had gone from dragging out a long, distant fight with the occasional punch to completely closing the distance. As Shoji was still floating up, bracing for the floor, Izuku also jumped and spun so he was in the stretched-out position he was used to. Feet first, the boy slammed his heels into his opponent, who managed to block some damage with his multiple arms. The attack struck rather hard, however, as he staggered on the floor, but before he could react, his knee buckled as he walked right into a gravity-dense sphere and was pulled onto one knee. In this moment of weakness, the greenette once again closed the gap, raising a leg up before bringing them both down. It was heel first into the masked one's back, and it knocked him out cold. Did you see that, guys? An axe kick to the spine! Woo! What a brutal end! With the crowd going wild as Midnight announced the winner, Bakugo got ready to leave. About time he figured something out. He better have it ready before we fight. Good luck, man. Yeah, you better not lose. Ha! Who do you think I am, extras? I'm gonna win this festival! In another room, Izuku sat down with a huff as Mina handed him a refilled bottle. She had taken the trip to the water fountain during the battle, and was glad to see Izuku's flushed body calm back down. I'm surprised you can change fighting style halfway through a match. What would you have done if it didn't work? The boy drank the second bottle as his shoulders raised for a shrug. Dunno, probably would have figured it out then, I guess. I was lucky that Shoji forgot about my little joint-bending trick. It won't work on Kacchan, though, so I need to figure it out now. He immediately started experimenting and drinking more as Mina put a cold towel on his forehead. It was very much appreciated as he felt rather refreshed. His fight with Todoroki had almost felt like cheating, as the greenette was surrounded in ice, but going against Shoji had raised his internal temperatures a little. For better or for worse, Izuku already knew that his fight against Bakugo with his explosive bursts of heat, he had to be a lot more worried about his internal temperatures rather than his water levels. He had to think of a way to win, and fast. You sure you can't do black holes? Even a really, really, really teeny-weeny one? The greenette nodded as he leaned into the cold towel. His brain had been thinking non-stop the whole time his rival battled against Tokoyami. The human grenade, as usual, ended up triumphant. They were now wading through the final break. I can increase gravity, but not in multiple directions. Each volume of space only has one of two vectors, being away or towards the planet's gravity. It made sense that way. She realized when Izuku was pulled around the air, he sometimes gave off the feeling of an orbiting planet. I can see where Bakugo got the name. Izuku then continued his explanation. I have tried before. In fact, it was one of the first things I wanted to do as a kid because Kacchan thought of it. I ended up doing everything I could think of to try and create one, but it just never worked. The towel on his head was replaced by another cooler one, and the freckled boy smiled at Mina's thoughtful gesture. Even if the sphere was smaller than a marble, I ended up fainting by the time I'd said increase about 10 times. It took a lot of focus, so it often became really unstable and swerved weirdly, like when you put all the pizza toppings on one slice and the box tips over because it was uneven. The alien girl could understand the straining focus as she imagined how hard it would be to control how her acid flowed from her body. I never wanted to try it again after my last time. I'd finally managed to create something interesting because after 5 increases, the air becomes really distorted. It wasn't a black hole, but the light from my lamp was bending really weirdly. I tried dropping a pen through it and, well, Izuku looked a little grumpy as he spoke. It flew out in a crazy direction and tore out one of my All Might posters. Never doing it again. Mina cackled her contagious laugh before tilting her head to the side, her black and gold eyes blinking as she thought. But wouldn't that be a really cool attack? If you can figure out how to redirect the way your pen flew, could you make a more extreme version of what you did in hero training? She was referring to when Izuku repelled attacks away from his body during hero training. The boy didn't like the idea after the fiasco with his poster, but Mina had a point. If he could redirect the trajectory of anything coming his way, he could even potentially take Bakugo's blasts at point-blank range, and maybe even send them back. The All Might poster was one thing, but beating Bakugo was another. The offer was just too tempting, and Izuku grinned. I've totally got to do that now. As flames erupted in towering columns from the corners of the podium, Mike's voice rang out loud and clear. It's finally the last battle of the UA High Sports Festival. Yes, it all comes down to this, folks. From the hero course, Izuku Midoriya. The deafening cheers accompanied the smiling greenette, who gave everyone a welcoming wave to the audience. He was fueling the flames of excitement when the attention was drawn to the other side of the stage. Versus his classmate, Katsuki Bakugo! The two lifelong rivals glared at each other with a smirk. Now, begin! Decrease! Izuku immediately jumped upward, but Bakugo fiercely followed suit, his explosions murderously crackling from his palms as the man barreled upward. The passionate pair were locked into an immediate close combat fight where they brutally exchanged fists. The crazy speed of both their ability and focus didn't match the refined nature of their savage movements, and it only got more intense as quirks joined the fray. Potent explosions started to spark up between the two, but the flash of forest green was fully capable of dodging the vicious detonations. They both parried the powerful punches before finally landing on the ground, taking heavy breaths to calm their berserk heartbeats. What was that? Did you see? They both went full out right from the get-go and neither backed down! Before Mike could even finish his last words, the pair ran headfirst at each other, their lungs burning in an enraged roar. The stadium was blinded by the flash of light igniting in all directions, and when the smoke cleared, the audience was greeted with Izuku completely unscathed from the attack. The Greenette had redirected it around his body like he did in hero training, but it was obvious that they had both improved greatly since then. Ugh! Bakugo groaned as Izuku slammed an accurately aimed heel into his arm and forced the blondes toward the ground. He braced his body so that he wouldn't topple down face first and had to dodge a punch incoming for his face. The gravity-reduced hand missed by a millimeter, and Bakugo quickly retaliated by fiercely grabbing the freckled arm of his opponent and kicking his rival into the air. Izuku rotated his body mid-air, forcing himself upside down as he created small spheres of dense gravity. The quick-witted, ruby-eyed blonde faltered, but not enough to cease the ruthless barrage of unrelenting attacks. It doesn't stop! They just keep going! The bombastic fight returns to the air as Izuku jumped upward, this time dragging Bakugo with him by reducing the boy's gravity as he jumped. Forced to rise up, the blonde knew what was happening next and managed to avoid major damage as he went crashing toward the ground. Missed! Damn it! Both boys were grinning like no tomorrow. Bakugo had avoided another one of Izuku's punches as the Greenette had been waiting like an ambushing predator, ready to strike. Unfortunately for him, his ruby-eyed rival saw through the scheme and managed to force distance between the two. Die! With two hands before him, the hot-headed blonde released a mighty eruption, crashing toward Izuku, and half the crowd screamed as the demonic outburst of explosions almost reached their faces. If it wasn't for Cementos creating a wall between the stage and the stands at the last second, there would have been a couple freshly singed citizens. Oi! What was that? Bakugo stopped to look at the panicked crowd on his right, and it definitely piqued his interest. After all, even if it had almost had an awkwardly horrible outcome, Izuku had redirected his blast, not just to avoid damage, but to fight back. I still haven't figured it out yet, okay? Mina literally helped me get the idea 10 minutes ago. Fine, hurry up then. Okay. The intense fight paused completely. Huh? Midnight looked between the two boys who had stopped the final battle to stare at Izuku's hands. What are you kids doing? The Greenette didn't look up, as a football-sized volume of air started to distort. 1 second, Miss Midnight. I just need to perfect this. Not just Japan, but the whole world watching this international event had to wait in silence as the freckled boy furrowed a brow. His hands were clenched and held out before him, the eyes focused on the way light passed. 6 spheres could be seen, and they were slowly shrinking until the whole structure was no bigger than an apple. Light bent slightly in 6 directions, although a third of it was a little lopsided. Bakugo let out a small spark, and they watched it swerve before firing off diagonally. Planetoid, you need to increase the left one more. The Greenette nodded, and shrank the volume he was increasing until the air was no longer warping in 2 directions. Light was now passing normally through the gravity-dense space except one spot. Seeing this, the blonde maliciously grinned. Now we're getting there. Midnight's voice made Bakugo turn to look at her, and the referee managed to squeak in a question. Why are you, helping him? Ruby eyes furrowed, matching his green companions, as they turned with an "Are you seriously asking me that?" face. So we can fight at our best, of course. His dumbass needs to figure out a way to hide the weakness now, or I'll beat his ass in seconds. Glancing at the Greenette, who was so close to hiding all evidence of gravity being manipulated, he placed his hands to his head. Think, Planetoid, think! The freckled one nodded before pinching his fingers, watching the distorting air shrink even more until it was the size of a cherry. Give me another spark. The blonde's hands sizzled, and they watched as the smoky black wisps of combustion floated around aimlessly before hitting the barely seen, gravity-dense volume of space's range. It orbited around before hitting center, and Izuku grinned as the thick smog swerved and went directly toward Bakugo. It was almost done. I can roughly control the direction now. I just need to imagine the shape of a crescent moon with the open end similar to a direction indicator. It's small but potent. I get exhausted more easily, but it can send one of Kacchan's largest explosions back at him. It could probably even direct more at this rate. I just need to figure out how to make this invisible to the naked eye. Shrinking it more and increasing gravity? No, I'll faint after a few uses. He was getting impatient with himself and heating up, but managed to compose himself in time. Okay, let me see if I can work around this. Come on, Izuku, I'm supposed to be able to adapt to anything coming my way. Letting the gravity-dense space disperse and return to Earth's natural strength, the greenette watched in fascination as the light distorted the opposite direction. Hold on. Hands out before him, Izuku made a hollow sphere, and within the slightly complicated shape, he decreased gravity. Once he did, he filled the hollowed shape with a gravity-dense sphere, and the air finally cleared up. The distortion of decreasing had cancelled out the change increasing created. It was now impossible to tell where he was directing anything to. Perfect! Hell yeah! It wasn't too difficult to hold and highly effective against incoming attacks. Bakugo distanced himself as he widely grinned. It was time for their match to resume. I guess you two boys are done? Okay, well, continue! As if the world pressed the resume button in the middle of the fight, the furious battle returned with great passion. An incoming blast was barely dodged as a fuming Bakugo released one detonation after another in a mad volley. The raging inferno was redirected back, and both boys rapidly descended into a fight where the heat scorched their skins and marred their hands. Dust and flaming rubble flew around the stage as the floor below them crackled under immense pressure. Their unruly, all-out battle was instinctively led by the boys' unrestrained and uncontrollable whims. Their intemperate nature caused Midnight's fingers to uneasily touch the edge of her rippable sleeves, as both terrifyingly strong boys were seeming to make the air itself quake. She decided against this, however, as the children still hadn't lost the one thing they seemed to have in common amidst the savage fight. That was their smiles. It became unclear whether the distorting air was Izuku's handwork or not, but either way, the heat and their vehement wills made this final exchange a battle to remember. The sensational fight was between two opposites that seemed to hold a stalemate until Bakugo's voice could be heard. The rough vocals were hoarse and tired, and the crowd could tell that both boys were reaching their limits. You think you're the only one making headway with your quirk, Planetoid? Izuku's hands were shaking just as much as his rivals, but he didn't falter, his body ready to react to whatever the opponent had for him. I got something for you, too! Since their last battle, Bakugo already knew that Izuku's quirk had the potential to redirect his greatest output, even with the costume to help. He needed a way to increase his firepower without damaging himself, and in the end, he also had a breakthrough. His quirk was less diverse than his green counterparts, but Bakugo's creative mind was more than ready for the challenge. You better not die, Planetoid. I broke my door and the old hag yelled at me for this. Holding one hand in the shape of a funnel the second they created distance, the blonde pointed his palm at his best friend. This was his current, most potent attack. AP short! Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video, so goodbye and have a divine day.